Hi, Acharya Maull here for the Awake Network and our Mindful Relationship Summit in partnership with Shambhala Mountain Center. And we have the great pleasure and honor here to be with Catherine and Gay Hendricks. And so welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good being with you, Fleet.
It's a real pleasure. I've known of your work for a long, long time. You are pioneers in really in the field of consciousness and certainly in body intelligence and really integrating body, mind, spirit, especially in the realm of a relationship is what you're best known for, although you've been involved in sports psychology and you're both longtime therapists, so you have very deep backgrounds. And but you've been modeling conscious relationship for probably tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people for many years. The Hendricks have published either apart or together more than 40 books. They've been on Oprah, and they travel the world, really making a huge difference in all of our lives. Because what's more important to any of us than relationship, especially our primary partnerships and marriages and intimate relationships, but really all of our important family relationships, even working relationships. It's really the essence of life, I think, and the basic principles of relationship, I think, are somewhat the same, even though we all know that when you get into intimate partnerships, that's really where rock meets bone, so to speak.
Yes. Definitely. It's the place where you test how well you've integrated your practical spirituality.
Exactly. There's been stories of several, back in the 60s and 70s, a number of young Americans went over and immersed themselves in ashrams or monasteries in India and felt they had really attained some level of realization, and then they came back and disrobed and got married. They found it was a whole long game.
Yes.
So, yeah. Authors of the best-selling Conscious Loving, The Big Leap, and Conscious Loving Ever After, How to Create Thriving Relationships at Midlife and Beyond. So great things. And people can find out about your work at Hendricks.com.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, HENDRICKS.com.
That's wonderful, wonderful. Okay, well, let's jump right in then. So, you all have really devoted your lives to studying and practicing and modeling and teaching about relationship. What inspired you all to do that? How did this happen?
Well, gosh, when we got you, go ahead. I was just so like, oh my goodness.
I was just going to start with a little joke. I said, if you knew either one of our families, you would know why we became therapists.
It's not uncommon, I don't think.
Well, we had, and I imagine this occurs for other people as well. When we met, we actually had a recognition of each other. There was a sense of, oh, there you are, and a sense of resonance right away. And so we, excuse me, when we first got together, we decided right away that we wanted to have all aspects of our lives be unified, and that we wanted to be able to live together and work together so that we experienced consciousness and fun all the time.
We've been together 38 years now, and it truly gets better and better every day, every moment. We've always had a great time together, but in recent decades, it's been really transcendent and absolutely wonderful. And it's based on a couple of key principles, actually, that we just practice every day to this day. If you come to our seminars, you learn how to speak honestly about your feelings, and you learn how to take responsibility for things in a healthy way rather than blaming and getting stuck in the blame game. And you also find out how to really support your own creativity and also support your partner's creativity. Creativity is a real big thing in relationships, because what we found in working with thousands of couples is that when individuals are out of touch with their own creative essence, they tend to take it out on the relationship. And so we've gone to great lengths to really stay in touch with our creativity and support the other person's creativity. Like for the past 5 years or so, I've been writing mystery novels about a Tibetan Buddhist private detective. And at first I just did it for fun, but then they started being published and became successful. And so throughout that whole time, Katie really supported that, even though in the beginning I wasn't writing relationship books and self-help books and things that looked like they were going to produce a lot of financial abundance. It turned out the mystery novels eventually have done so, but in the beginning, she was just kind of supporting me for something I creatively wanted to do. And so that's really key in having a healthy relationship.
Well, that's great. You know, I think it's not uncommon that that we sometimes suppress some of our needs or set our needs aside in an attempt to compromise and be in relationship. And from what you're saying, that probably comes back to haunt us.
We've heard so much that relationships are about compromise and sacrifice, and we have really not found that to be true at all. And in fact, a relationship that has enough space, where you create enough space inside and between each other and around you, that each person can do what they most want to do. And the relationship can really then be a source of, how can I support you in doing what you most want to do, and really developing that so it becomes not just creativity, but co-creativity rather than compromise.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like when you all met back in 1980 that this was kind of, you know, the proverbial soulmate kind of situation, just kind of recognizing each other on some kind of spiritual level. And so it's just been a walk in the park ever since, right?
Well, I wouldn't quite say that. I mean, we went through our ups and downs like everybody else, because we, you know, when we got together, we were both broke financially. And so we had to struggle with all that sort of thing for a couple of years. And, you know, then raising kids and travels and all that kind of thing. So it's, you know, but the key thing is the tools we teach are actually the ones we use, and those are the things that allow you to keep spiraling upwards in regard to your level of intimacy.
Mm-hmm. Well, whether we meet that proverbial soulmate or not, the falling in love part in intimate relationships in some ways seems like the easier part. But how about maintaining that or sustaining it or reawakening it? How do we stay in love? Because it seems like a natural process. People change. That first blush of love fades at some point, and it seems like there's a whole different evolution of relationship beyond that period of first falling in love.
We found that committing to what we really wanted and then recommitting to it was really essential in continuing to move along the path of what we really wanted. And then I think also we put a really big emphasis on being real, being able to be who we are with each other, being willing to give and receive what's really going on. So telling each other what we're experiencing, what we're feeling, and really receiving that made a really big difference.
The thing about recommitment is really important, because we started out with some clear commitments to each other, like things that we'd never committed before in a relationship, like we committed to be honest with each other, and we committed to listen authentically to the other person without judging them, and some big commitments like that are harder than they sound. And we made commitments to taking responsibility when things come up rather than blaming the other person. And so with big commitments like that, it's like when my daughter was little, she took riding lessons, and I would be standing there, you know, watching her ride around. And one time she fell off the horse, and, you know, I freaked out being her parent. But the riding instructor, I mean, she didn't even blink an eye. She just got Amanda up and made sure she was okay, and then put her back on the horse, even though she was like only 5 years old. But she said later, it's that act of getting right back on the horse and heading toward your destination again that really does it. And it was true. Within half a lap, it was like Amanda had never fallen off. She was back having fun on her horse again. So it's the same thing in relationship. You're going to fall off the horse lots of times. The important thing is to know how to get right back on and make those basic commitments again, because those are the ones that really make a difference. Like just being able to share your feelings honestly with another person without feeling them judged. Such a rare thing in life, but if you can create a relationship at home like that, that's pure magic.
Well, Kevin, you mentioned before the quality of space in a relationship. And, I think sometimes there's a tendency, like in relationship, we should almost merge to some degree and know everything about each other. And, what about is there a value in the kind of allowing a certain mystery about the other, that they are still a separate person from us, they have their own being? There's a certain quality of mystery between us that's never totally resolved, I think. And I just wonder if you could speak to that a moment.
Sure. When we wrote Conscious Loving, and we included the co-commitments that we have found the most valuable, the first two are about I commit to being close, and I commit to clearing up anything in the way of being close. But the second one is I commit to my own complete creative individuation. So we find that both of those urges, the urge to merge and the urge to individuate, are really essential for the engine of relationship. We call it the relationship dance, that you're either getting close or you're getting separate. But we have all this mythology in relationship about what we're supposed to. We're supposed to be like, how's your other half? We're supposed to be glued to each other. And we find great delight in each really supporting our own creative path. And then we get to share the juiciness of that with each other. And it sparks not only discovery, but it sparks a renewal of romance, because we're always interrupting the kinds of patterns that people get into, what I sometimes call fly-by loving, where you're just going to go, love you, babe, as you're heading out the door. So when we're giving attention to each other, we're fully present to each other, because that's really our highest priority. And then when we're engaged in our individual creative pursuits, we each know that that's fueling the engine of our relationship as well.
Yeah, so everybody has those twin needs, the urge to merge and the urge to have individual creative connection with the universe. And every relationship needs to be big enough to have both people in unity and both people in individuation all at the same time. That's when it really gets juicy and alive with creative possibility 24 hours a day.
Well, that relationship dance that you mentioned, I think that's where we sometimes get in trouble. It's like, I'm wanting more closeness in the moment, and the other person's like, I'm needing a little more space. And, it can be this push-pull kind of thing. But I suppose the honesty that you mentioned is really the pathway to working that out and clearing that.
Well, and especially we assist people to tune into their body intelligence, their body sensations that actually let them know, I organically and authentically want to get close now, and now I want to take space. And I would say that of the two of them, taking space is more difficult for people, because the mythology is that means there's something wrong. And so we really work with people to be able to recognize those signals, because if you don't, you're going to do something in your relationship to create what you think is space, but it's actually distance, because there's a sense of static or things that are unspoken in between there. But when you actually say, hey, I'm just feeling this a little bit of grittiness, and I think I'd like to go and take a walk by myself, or I'm going to go out in the backyard and just lie there for a little while, and you let your partner know rather than surprising them by disappearing.
Well, I love that distinction you made between space and distance. That seems like a very important distinction. Also, this question of honesty really strikes me. I think in my earlier, when I was pretty young in my early relationships, I was, probably afraid of honesty, and probably involved in, various codependent adaptations, just trying to keep a relationship going or something. And with my first spiritual teacher, the Tibetan master Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, I spent a lot of time with him as his attendant. And he was so radically honest. I actually found it kind of shocking, because I didn't grow up around that. I grew up in a family where nobody said anything about anything, right?
Yeah.
Very kind of suppressed, 1950s, And
yes.
So I was kind of shocked by that. But then I began to discover, how much simpler it made life. by just being straightforward and honest about what you're needing and what you're feeling.
Yeah, and it's so, like my grandmother said, if you always tell the truth, you never have to remember what you said.
That's
You're
right.
in the
Yeah.
present moment.
Yeah. The other
Some of
thing
that
we
timeless
do is
wisdom.
in telling the truth, it opens up a flow in you that you can actually experience. So when people conceal, they actually put a kink in their energy hose so that they're not really experiencing the flow of aliveness. And when you are authentic, that actually gives you more juiciness. And when you say something, when you're describing what you're actually experiencing, that's the closest that we've come to really being able to talk about telling the truth, or what is it when you're being authentic. It's that you're able to give attention to what's going on, what am I experiencing, and you're able to describe it in a way that doesn't blame anybody. And I think that what people don't realize is that creates such a spark of aliveness and connection, and then ability to play with each other rather than having your relationship be about work. Most people think that if you're in a relationship, it's hard work. We really haven't found that. It does take practice, but it really isn't work. I think it's just the best fun ever that's available on the planet.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how we can bring this. I mean, I think a lot of people are listening here going, they make it sound too easy. Or
Yeah, right.
But they're really lucky, But you did mention blame. And, maybe by the time in a relationship that we get into conflict and we get into blaming and criticizing, we're already into that distance. We've already fallen out of alignment. But how do we work with that tendency in relationships to be blaming the other when there are problems or distancing, or where the other is expressing needs of some kind, and instead of being able to listen to that, we feel threatened by that when we start blaming or criticizing?
Well, one thing to understand, I mean, if you look at the television today, you'll probably see politicians blaming each other. So it's modeled everywhere, the subject of blame. And many of us grew up in families where there was a lot of blame. But what you don't see modeled very often, is very rare, is how to actually take healthy responsibility for something you've been blaming the other person for. And we developed a little easy way to remember that, kind of a body mantra, which we call ha, ha, When you catch yourself blaming that ha, I gotcha. What's underneath that, you need to, I wonder where I got to see the world that way, or what am I feeling right now? That act of benignly taking responsibility, not blaming yourself, because that's just as unproductive as blaming the other person. The problem with blame is that it fires off the emotion of glee, and it has a psychochemistry to it. And so people literally get high off blaming the other person.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that, if carried to the extreme in the Old Testament, led stoning, which still goes on in parts of the world today, stoning adulterers and that kind of thing, because of that moment of glee. We know what the problem is and we're going to fix it. Well, imagine, though, that if you had that same group of people saying,
how is this familiar
familiar to me?
Yeah.
What have I done that I should be stoned for? And
wonder,
where is my own sexuality? Those kinds of questions are very important. They move people forward, but you don't see them modeled very often. That's why when we've been on talk shows oftentimes, and we've talked about how to stop blaming and start wondering, the audience will sometimes go, I don't get it. If my husband would just stop doing what he's doing, then I'd be happy.
Right.
And so it's a very addictive thing. Blame is an addiction.
It is totally an addiction.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I also wanted to let everybody know that we have a whole chapter in our new book, Conscious Loving Ever After, on how to create a no-blame relationship. And the steps that we went through, and making a commitment to ending criticism, and want you to know that both of us came from really, really critical backgrounds. Like, we're kind of pickled in it. So we're really convinced that if we can do it, that other people can do it, because the practices that we share are actually ones that not only we have used, but we've used with, thousands of people. So we know that they work. And it just is a matter of your stepping in and starting to use them, which I think takes us through a doorway of fear. When we're going into the unknown, there's this little flurry of fear. So we also have developed ways that you can move with using your body intelligence from fear to flow. And that's also in the new book, something we call fear melters, and how to move from that into presencing. So this is something we've really looked at in great detail, and how to actually enjoy in your relationships the act of discovery, rather than settling into patterns and having the same old kind of familiar but miserable.
Here's a very practical suggestion we make to couples here, and we can just pass it along. Whenever you find yourself in an argument and angry, as soon as possible, get down underneath the anger and find out what you're afraid about and what you feel sad about, because those two emotions are often overlooked. The feeling of being hurt and the feeling of being scared. Oftentimes, the addictive nature of anger is such that it keeps you locked at the anger and blame level. And what's important and will help diffuse those recycling arguments is to drop down and say, okay, what am I afraid of? And communicate that to your partner. Tell them, I'm scared about this, or I'm afraid about that.
Or even just, I'm scared and I don't know why.
Yeah, or I feel so sad and I don't know why. The moment you open the door to those deeper levels in your body that's underneath the anger level, the faster you can move through things and unplug the energy from conflicts.
Well, I love that expression, from fear to flow. That really says it all. And this idea of moving beyond blame is really critical. Sakya Mipam Rinpoche, who's the spiritual head of the Shambhala community and Shambhala Mountain Center, one of the partners for this conference, talks all the time about creating a culture of no blame.
Yes.
A culture of no blame, in which then we're free to actually make mistakes and live and work with each other. And I think even neurobiologically and psychologically, we're set up pretty much either operate from fear or to operate from vulnerability and openness. And of course, the more fearful we become, you can get all kinds of untoward behaviors. We see it, the world full of it. But if we can dissolve, I love that fear melters idea. If we can melt some of those fears, get back into flow, then I think as human beings, we are naturally partnering, compassionate. Our pro-social behaviors come out quite naturally.
One of the other steps that we really emphasize with people is the magic of appreciation. I think it's one of the most underutilized ways of expressing that makes a huge difference in your relationship. The giving your sensitive awareness to what you're experiencing or what your partner's experiencing, and really focusing on, what is it about you that I really cherish? And have I expressed that to you, either verbally or non-verbally? And we know now that really successful relationships have at least a 5-to-1 ratio of appreciations to criticisms, and that includes the eye rolls and the kinds of nonverbal things that we do. And so we started early in our relationship to go at least 5-to-1, and now it's probably 500 to 1. And it's a very simple thing that people can do. That's like putting money in your bank account that you can then draw on for when things are a little bit tougher and you have something that really needs to be negotiated or expressed.
Wonderful.
We've been keeping track over the years, and we moved into this house 15 years ago, a little over 15 years ago now, and we know for sure that neither one of us have said anything critical to each other in the time we've lived in this house, maybe before too, but we just had a kind of clear demarcation point. So we can say that neither one of us have blamed or criticized each other this century.
Oh, that's fabulous. And I think that's what you all are talking about, that level of commitment and intentionality, that if we just let, those kind of default behaviors happen, they erode relationship. And if we have that conscious intention to really have a ratio, at least to begin with, to 3-to-1 or 5-to-1 or 10-to-1, appreciation versus criticism, that it actually works. It begins to change the relational field. It actually probably begins to change us neurobiologically.
I think it absolutely does. And one thing that people don't realize is if you're not blaming and criticizing, you have a lot of free time. There's a lot of open space, because most of the time, if people aren't actually blaming and criticizing, they're involved in rehearsing or rehashing. So when you clear that, whoa, there's just an open field for what we call creativity, co-creativity, play, discovery, and you can start that right now. You don't have to kind of work out everything, because also people think, well, I have to fix this, and then maybe we'll be able to have a closer relationship. So committing to have a closer relationship, and then in the midst of that, you just handle things when they come up, rather than waiting until both people are perfect, which never happens, or waiting until both people are kind of in sync, because hardly anybody grows at the same rate as the other person. Where, somebody might really be having a big opening and somebody else is integrating.
I'm very excited because Katie's about to take off on a European tour on Sunday, and I'm excited for her, but I'm also very excited that I'm not going, because we've created our lives in such a way that both of us get to do what we most love to do. And so she loves to teach a lot. I love to teach a little tiny bit, but I'm more of a writer's temperament. I love to stay home and write and deal with, talk to people on video and things like that, but she likes to go out and have big seminars and that kind of thing. So you want to make room in a relationship for both people to do what they most love to do.
Well, yeah, I'm ready to move in. This sounds good. Well, would you all lead us in a little exercise here for our audience?
Right.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
One of the principles that we talk about a lot in our books is how your ability to love another person is really synchronized with your ability to love yourself. And so the more you can open up in unconditional love for yourself, the more you're able to unconditionally love your partner. So take a few moments right now just to kind of settle into your body. Take 2 or 3 easy, gentle breaths, and let them be breaths that fill your whole chest and belly. So take a few easy breaths. Settle yourself down into your body. And then just try on a new mental idea. Just say to yourself in your own tone of voice, I love myself unconditionally. Say it to yourself in your mind 2 or 3 times. I love myself unconditionally. Breathe with it. Settle it into your body. So now let's integrate both mind and body. Now I'd like you to say it to yourself in your mind in your own tone of voice, and then pause for 10 seconds to feel it in your body. 10 seconds would be about the length of time it takes to take one long, slow, easy breath in and out. So here I'll show you. Say in your mind, I love myself unconditionally. Now for the next 10 seconds, feel it.
Feeling it, noticing your body sensations, just noticing your feet.
Say it again in your mind. I love myself unconditionally. And then drop it into your body. Just feel that for 1 or 2 long, slow in-breath and out-breaths. And then one final time. Again, I love myself unconditionally. Say that in your mind. And now feel it in your body. Next time you catch yourself out of sorts or maybe even in a conflict, just take a moment, drop out of things and drop into yourself and reestablish that connection with the feeling of being completely lovable. What happens often as we get into conflicts is we leave behind that feeling of being okay or lovable in our bodies and replace it with a big sense of anguish and fear. And then out of that comes blame to another person. And so whenever possible, recondition yourself to that feeling of flow inside by simply dropping back into that feeling of benignly loving yourself.
And if you want to add to that, you can right on the tail end of that, just add in, and I'm willing to give and receive more love every day. I'm willing to give and receive more love every day. And then that begins to include others around you. And then we get to all enjoy an acceleration of being in the ground of love rather than in the ground of fear.
Well, thank you. That was wonderful. I could feel the endorphins and the oxytocin kicking in. I could feel myself vibrating and being happy all the way down to my toes. That was really
good.
Wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, thank you all so much. It's been absolutely wonderful being here with you today. And it's really clear just from spending a little time with you, even virtually like this, that you guys really do this stuff that you're teaching.
Yeah, we really do.
Comes through loud and clear. You can just see it in the way that you are with each other. And it's really a beautiful thing. And I know it's going to be inspiring to everyone in our audience that we can aspire to taking on relationship as a conscious practice, not as work, but as a delightful practice. And it's clearly that you all have managed to make it so in your lives. So thank you so much for spending time with us today for this Mindful Relationship Summit.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Our pleasure.
Okay. Wish you both all the best in your continued teaching work.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you so much.